sometimes you create your own constraints as a creative exercise to help you like really figure out what you're doing. Like you get excited about some idea and you're like, okay, I'm creating this sandbox for myself.
Hello, and welcome to Behind the Game, the podcast where we talk to experts in the gaming industry, sponsored by Yoda One. I am Sandy, your host, and today I'm joined with Luke, my wonderful co-host, and today we are talking to Rich Vreeland, also known as Disasterpeace. He has been making soundtracks for games for over 20 years with classics like Fez. Rich, welcome. I always like to start this podcast by asking a certain question, and basically it is how you got into your industry and how you got into your career.
Sure. Oh man, it's a long story. I'll try to say it as succinctly as possible. There are two things that are important about the way that I grew up. Or I mean, a lot of things, of course, but these are things I like to mention, which is my mother was a graphic designer. So from a very young age, we had a computer in the house, and I loved to get on there and mess around and make stuff, make graphics and things. And so from a very early age, maybe like 12 or 13, I was like on the internet doing, God knows what. And so by the time I was 14 or 15, I was like doing all this fantasy wrestling stuff, which was basically creative, competitive fan fiction, like writing. And this was like a whole ecosystem of mostly kids and some,
WWE sort of wrestling.
yeah, exactly. Mostly
That's pretty
kids
cool.
and some old people who are kids at heart, I guess. And so I became one of like the go-to people for graphics and like websites and entrance music for people. And so I started doing freelance work, making a small buck when I was probably like 14 or 15.
Wow.
And I grew up in a musical household. My stepfather was the music director at our church, and my mom played the piano and sang. My sister played the piano and sang, and so I was a little crowded out of that a little bit, just because there's so much music already and it was more of a kind of a shy kid, and so I would like retreat into my room and draw. So I didn't get into music until later, but I picked up guitar in high school, and I was already on a path of like doing graphic design like as a career. Like I worked at a company doing websites, and I went off to college to do it, and basically through my late teens, I got really into writing music, and I dropped out of college to do music, and I switched gears, went to
Passion,
music
just
school.
just sort of whatever you wanted to do at the time. I mean, what was just a hobby at that point?
It was a hobby. Yeah, I was studying graphic design and I was writing music, basically playing guitar, lots of like riffs, new metal style music. That was because that was kind of in vogue at the time back in like 2004.
Yeah.
And but all the while I was getting really into video game music. It's just something that was, I think, for me very nostalgic, and I was like, wow, I can't believe people are making their own versions of this, whether it was remixes or using the old video game hardware to make music. And so I got really involved in like internet communities and started releasing my own like chiptune album, concept albums, and started going to music school. Didn't have any notion of being a composer, just knew that I liked music, and maybe I'll work in a studio. I don't, maybe I'll be wrapping cables or something until I get a real job. I don't know, but I just knew that I was where I wasn't really working for me. And then I stumbled into an opportunity. Strangely enough, it was on one of these fantasy wrestling like message boards where I would post my music. Someone was like, "Hey, I work for a game company, and we need music for our game." And this was like a pre-smartphone era cell phone game. So I was doing
What
like
was it? I'm
very.
I'm curious. Do you remember?
It was called Greater Evil, Ville,
Okay.
Zombies, and I don't even know if it came out, but I don't think it did. But I got paid to make music, and it was all
Ah,
general MIDI, like MIDI files, like very old school, including sound effects, by the way. So that was weird, but fun. And I got paid, and I thought, wow, maybe I could do this. Like
so that
maybe I could.
was that a light bulb moment, just a realization that there was a model for it.
Sure, yeah. And I was probably
Yeah.
19 at the time, and proceeded to do a few more projects for that company, and that just became my MO. Like, I really want to write music for a living, and got really into doing it for games when I was at college, and played live shows for a long time. Started going to lots of conferences, and just kind of just put my thumb in everything for a while there, trying to figure it out.
Wow. What an inspirational story of someone like truly following their passion and, it working out, I guess. Like
Yeah. Well,
I honestly believe that if you do truly follow your passion, like, and if you just continue doing the things that you enjoy doing, eventually you'll get to where you want to be. I'm sure some people it doesn't work out like that, but I think,
yeah.
but what an inspirational story. I have
Yeah,
to
you don't know
ask
if you don't
though,
try.
what is your favorite video game soundtrack, like, currently? When you were talking about, like, you liked video game music, like, what was your favorite?
So back then, I mean, I would have said probably the Chrono series, like Chrono
Okay.
Trigger and Chrono Cross.
Mhm.
Those are my favorite soundtracks. But I also was really into Metroid. There was
Metroid,
a
yeah.
community run by this composer, Grant Henry, who had this project called Metroid Metal. And that was one of the first communities that I joined. I was really into that music. Um, Koji Kondo, like,
Yep.
Mario, Zelda. I mean, all the hits.
Uh-huh.
I
All the
mean,
hits.
also
Yeah.
happen to be some of the best video game music ever written. So,
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, and then nowadays it's, I've definitely still love that music, and some other things have come up along the way, but yeah.
I
Right.
mean, I don't know all of the references, but as part of any of those references, was there any of that? Sometimes your music does get kind of forlorn, for lack of a better word. There's not all of it, obviously. Like Monsters Ate My Birthday Cake. That's that's one thing, but there's some of your music is dark. Some of it's creepy, and some of it's got that sort of
Sure.
sad, lonely feeling. Is that an inspiration thing, or is that a Rich thing?
I think it's both, maybe. There's definitely, I mean, from the time I was a teenager, I really liked certain styles of music, very angsty music. When I started playing guitar, I was really into Tool and Rage Against the Machine, and prog rock and Linkin Park, and I just liked dark sounding music. So I think there's there's that component in there, um, but also some of it has been like the positions that I've found myself in. Like, the first game that I scored that was really successful was Fez in 2011, 2012. And that has a plethora of like moods in it. I mean, some of the music is very happy, some of it is kind of mysterious, some of it is very dark and forlorn, like you said. And as a result of that project, I found myself working in feature films a few years later with It Follows, the horror
Yep.
film. And they used the music from Fez as a reference for that film, specifically like tracks like Death.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
the darker, the more
There's some
forlorn
stuff from
music.
Hyperlight Drifter as well that's pretty dark and
Yeah,
moody.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely, it's the inspiration for the project, right? I mean, like with the Monsters Ate My Birthday Cake as an example, like, it has sort of a lightness to it, and that inspires me to write in a more light way. Although there is more somber music in there, because
Yeah.
even in a story like that, there's themes of loss and whatever. But in Hyperlight Drifter, like, it's about, a lone wanderer who's like has some sort of congenital issue that's going to kill them. So, I mean, that
Yeah.
definitely seeps into the music to some
Right. Then
degree.
you
Yeah.
can't have happy music. Right. You can't have happy
Yeah.
Minecraft
It
music.
always does the trick for me when I'm in a good mood and I listen to that. It just brings it right down. And then I'm in a different place in a
Sorry.
good way. Like I prefer to be forlorn than happy. I listen to that one a lot.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I
Um,
find that sometimes music like that has the opposite effect, which is strange. It's all
yeah.
kind of mysterious in a way, like how the moods of music can affect a person.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe I really want to understand some process stuff or how you go about it, because our
Yeah.
audience are mostly kind of indie game devs who are making their own games, sometimes doing the music for the games, sometimes not, sometimes collaborating with a musician, but ultimately they need to create an experience that's memorable. They need to create an experience that's iconic, or at least at the very least unique, something that when people, they keep coming back and the songs from the levels stick, right? Do you have any I know that's not really a question, but do you have any general reflections on what makes music in a game specifically memorable or really stick with people?
One of the things about music is that there's a tendency to associate music with a time and a place. Like that's pretty common for like how you remember music. And so one of the advantages that games have over other media with music is that you tend to spend a lot of time playing them, and visiting certain locations is tends to be a thing, or repeating certain whatever experiences. And so the music has a tendency to really worm itself into your brain, for better or worse, right? Because certainly music can make or break a game sometimes. Music can be like the thing that you really latch onto, and it really defines the experience of playing it, and really uh, captures the feeling of playing it. But it can also be like the thing that is just so grating and annoying and repetitive and detracting from the experience.
Right. Sometimes I just turn the music off in a game, and then sometimes I play a game just for the music, honestly.
Yeah, totally. And there's a whole culture of that, like of muting music in games because for whatever reason. And so there's a really big opportunity there. And I think for me, it's for a long time, it's been a consideration of mine to like, I really want the music to make the game and not, not break it. So part of that is really tending to like the players, attention span and the amount of like the amount they have to like you want to give the player room to breathe when they're playing. You don't want to over inundate them with music. So for me, it's always been sort of a bang for your buck kind of mentality. Like, how do I maximize this music? So I tend to gravitate towards less being more, but not in the sense of like having less music that repeats a lot, but more like maybe you have areas where there's no music, or you really, or there's areas where like, or periods of time where the music is not the focal point, and just really trying to lean into like how can you maximize the affect of music without boring the player, or draining the player of energy because they have just gotten so sick of what they're hearing.
I will say that when I'm playing Minecraft, Minecraft doesn't I don't, maybe it's something wrong with, like, the file that I have downloaded on my computer, but it does not consistently play music, and that absolutely drives me crazy. I want to listen to the Minecraft music. Like, I play Minecraft with Minecraft music, and so I actually mute the Minecraft music in game and then look up on YouTube Minecraft music and play Minecraft music, so it continuously plays.
Yeah. That's interesting. I feel like Minecraft has a very particular scheme for like how they implement music, where yeah, like it goes quite a long time sometimes without playing anything,
Yeah,
right?
and I'm like, I want my calming music, like, I'm sitting here watching the sunset, you know, maybe something to play in my ear, but,
Yeah.
um,
That's
Yeah, I
funny.
wonder if it's part of their generating algorithms that they have for creating the worlds themselves. I wonder if that's layered on top.
I don't
Um,
think so. I think it's actually pretty simple, the music
mm,
scheme for Minecraft. Like, I don't think it's changed much.
mm.
I could be wrong, but I mean, I remember back in the day, like, having known the composer and stuff, like it just seemed like it's kind of like playlists, for
Mhm.
different contexts, and it just sort of plays music periodically.
When you were saying that though about not overwhelming the player with music and restraint, that really clicked with me. I think that there aren't that many musicians who really emphasize restraint rather than it's like the opposite of an 80s metal guitar solo. Whatever,
Yeah.
it's the exact opposite extreme of that. There, and I think that's the thing that clicks with me most
Yeah.
about your music. I also like
Mm.
I listen to a lot of Sufjan Stevens, and that's the same thing that I like about his music is
Mm.
that
Yeah.
at no moment, except when it goes 100% nuts, at no moment is there self-indulgence at all. And that opens space for you to kind of be with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing that I try to avoid is like being an advocate for music. Like I don't want to be like an arbitrary advocate for the medium, which I think is what happens sometimes, especially because culturally there's a sense that audio is undervalued in games. Um, and I think there's some truth to that for sure. But at the same time, like I don't want to just like push for something just because it's something that I do. You know what I mean? Like it might not suit anybody else but me. Like at the end of the day, you want to like do the thing that's going to make the experience as good as it can be. And sometimes that's music and sometimes it's not. So, it's more about like, for me, it's more about pushing for what's going to, elevate something as much as possible.
When you're working with a developer, have you ever had an experience where they want to put, this really heavy, crazy music into the game and you're like, I actually don't think that's the best option, and you kind of maybe try to change their mind or do something a little bit different? How do you handle that, and how do you like talk them into doing what you think is best? Or do you just listen to what they say and just go for it?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah, I
good
mean,
question. I was wondering that.
it's a big part of collaborating, and it's not unique to games. I mean, it's the same thing as in film and TV and every other medium that I've worked in is like the psychology of working with somebody else. There are projects where I'm kind of given free reign to figure it out. There are other projects where I'm working with a creative director who, it's a gradient of like personalities as far as like how lenient they are or how specific they are about what they want. And so a part of my job is kind of being a therapist a little bit. Uh, and then, yeah, there are times
Talking them
where
down from the guitar solo, yeah.
yeah, there are times where I feel really strongly about something and I really push against it. But there are a lot of times where you just kind of have to like have faith in the process and, you know, um, fall in line basically and say, okay, I'm trusting that you know the vision of this the best. And, I want to be I want to be that conduit for this. The funny thing is that sometimes the more you work with somebody, the less you might have that patience.
Yep.
Or you might start to delineate like, you know, and that's happened to me before, where it's like, you have some amount of like um, openness and willingness to do that, and then if you're subsequently working on more and more stuff, you want to see that you're being able to get to new places,
Right.
and that's not always possible.
Is that part of your decision-making process for working on a project, or which thing you might work on where you might see, all right, this is a sequel, it's kind of the same vibe, I don't really want to work on it because it's just more of the same and I would rather choose something that's more creatively challenging?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into like what I choose to work on. Um, I I'm very fortunate in that like I'm at the stage of my career where I can pretty much say no to whatever. I don't if I don't think it's the right fit for me. And sometimes you have to say no to things that seem cool, but I just don't have the band. I don't feel like I have the bandwidth at the time, or I don't think it's going to be fun for whatever reason. Um,
So
and
fun is a factor.
At this stage of my career, fun is absolutely a factor. I would say like as my ambition has gone down, my demand for fun has gone up, and I think that has. There are other things in my life that have made things better for me, um, more so than that, but it's a factor for sure. Um, like, yeah, I think I was kind of chasing the ambition for a long time, and at some point that ceased to matter or work for me, and I just had to like get my shit together, get my life together, and then at that point, work became more fun.
Right. I actually listened to a podcast a while ago, and it was about the art of saying no and how much power it can have. Just because if you're spreading yourself too thin and chasing that ambition, like you said, you're kind of climbing like a stairwell that will never get anywhere. So um, yeah, I definitely think that's something that a lot of people don't talk about. Because I guess people in the earlier careers, everyone's like, say yes, try new opportunities, and that's great. But at some point, you do have to learn the art of saying no.
Yeah, there's a trajectory. Like if you're doing anything, and people are in different stages of their life, and for me, having done it for a long time, I got to a point where I had to change. I've had to gradually change things about how I work, and it did for me. It also started as like saying yes to everything, and then over time, it became incrementally saying no to more and more things, so that I could really focus and have the space that I needed to um, you know, have a good life, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
enjoy life, not be stressed
yeah,
all the time.
yeah, exactly.
Maybe we could jump into, and I'm really curious about this, the actual process. So once you have found something that you think is really interesting,
Mm.
and you want to work on it, you've agreed to work on it. What is the process? Do you sit down and play a demo of the game with no sound? Do you just, stare at clouds? Is it an interview process where you try to get as much information? Is it different every time? I want to understand your process and how much it varies.
It's literally all the things you just mentioned. And
I got to ask
so,
shorter
yeah,
questions. Yeah.
I mean, it's gathering, it's information gathering, it's reflecting, it's doing concepts, improvising at the piano, or exploring sound palette ideas, doing research, playing the game for sure is a big one. Taking notes, copious amounts of notes, just trying to figure out like when I do hit the ground, like where do I want to land? Like what sort of information do I want to have? Um, and yeah, I mean, there's the concept phase is dramatically different than like when you actually start working on it, and you know, ostensibly you run into a lot of things that maybe you thought were going to be like the thing for this project, and they end up not fitting. And that's just the case every time, and coming to terms with that sort of reality.
I remember many, many years ago that you did a talk. I don't remember where. I just think I saw it on YouTube maybe like 8 years ago, and you talked about constraints. So are constraints part of that? Do you like to have, if I remember, you're saying, constraints are good, if I remember correctly. It's been a while, but what kinds of constraints help as opposed to hurt that early part of the process?
The kind of constraints that help are, if a project has a very particular identity and it's clear, that helps a lot in narrowing down like what sort of direction I might take. If the identity of a project is like unclear, it's kind of wishy-washy, it's changing constantly, I don't feel like I have a ground to stand on, and I don't really know how to start. I'm just kind of like throwing stuff at the wall. There's already some amount of that already, so when you don't know what you're working on, it's even worse. Um, that's a big component of it. Um, and sometimes you create your own constraints as a creative exercise to help you like really figure out what you're doing. Like you get excited about some idea, and you're like, okay, I'm creating this sandbox for myself, and I'm continually like sculpting it down and making it more concise so that I have a rule set that I can follow that'll just um, help me realize something that is cohesive. Because without constraints, it's really hard to make anything that's cohesive.
When in that early stage, are you usually sharing? Is it a very frequent back and forth with the developer, basically giving them early samples of this is the what I'm thinking, little demos and tracks where they can kind of say yes, yes, yes to the direction, and then maybe it's more off to the races.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that tends to be a way of working. For me, the communication is really important. The understanding where we stand is really important. I want to have like a sense of confidence about where I stand with the creative direction. Like because there have been projects where I had this idea that like, oh, we're doing great, like we're really close to the finish line, everyone is on board with this, and then it turned out that it wasn't the case, and it was sort of like a giant slap in the face, like super big surprise. So I really try to focus on like making sure that everyone's on the same page, and that I have a sense of like I've been given the green light to pursue a certain direction, because if that's not there, it's hard. It's really challenging emotionally to like make progress and not be like worried about what I'm doing. So uh and the primary way that I would tend to communicate is with music, and depending on who you're working with, you can get away with less or more as far as like the fidelity of what you're making. You know, if you're working with somebody who's not like um, very well versed in music, you kind of have to do more heavy lifting in order to like communicate what you're trying to communicate. Sometimes you get lucky and you can kind of like say you're doing some kind of score that has a bunch of different elements in it. It's very like high fidelity or whatever, and you could just send like a piano sketch over and like say this is kind of the feeling I'm imagining, and you might be able to do that, and that could be a very fast way of working. But for a lot of people, that they may not get it, they just like, oh, this sounds like a shitty piano. like, like
Right.
this
Right.
isn't what I want for my game. And it's like, no, well, you're kind of missing the point, but also it's your fault. As a composer, it's kind of your fault because you didn't think that
Right.
through before you went down that path.
How do you handle negative feedback from people you're working with? Because as I worked in freelancing for quite a few years before I was lucky enough to find One, but sometimes it can be tough. Like you put a lot of effort into something and you submit it, and then they come back and they're like, "Yeah, nope, hate it." Like all this negative feedback, and you just have to be like, "Okay," and scratch it and do what they
Yeah,
want, even if you like we kind of talked about, like, even if you don't think that's the best option.
it's challenging. I mean, there's a lot to say about that topic. I think that there have been a myriad of things that have helped me over my career, the course of my career. One of the things that's helped me is trying not to identify so closely with my work. Like my work is not me. Like we're not this. You know what I mean? Like it's not my person. It's something that I made. And quite frankly, a lot of the times when I'm making stuff, it's sort of in this like fugue state. Like I don't know what I'm doing totally, so I can't really take credit for it. It's can almost be like almost spiritual kind of thing sometimes.
Can you bring Fugue Rich out here at the end?
Probably not. it's it's hard, but the other thing is like I think as my personal life has gotten more meaty, I guess, like meaty, like more substantive, and I've gone through more stuff, like it sort of steeled me in a way that makes criticism about my work kind of just kind of bounce off me like it's not a big deal, because in the grand scheme of things, because I don't identify my self-worth with my work, like the creative output, it's easy. It's a lot easier to deal with that kind of stuff, and then there's so many considerations. Like I bring an agenda to most projects. Like I have a personal agenda about what I'm trying to do, but at the same time, there are situations and projects where I don't feel that strongly, because, like for instance, sometimes I'll take a corporate type project because it sounds like the work will be fun, the
Mhm.
turnaround is quick, the money is good. Those are the kind of situations where maybe I don't feel as emotionally invested in the outcome.
Right.
Um,
Is your
so yeah,
discography part of that uh, list in your head? Is that a factor that you're always thinking about? I'm This is going to go out there to, let's say, fans. Also, I'll be totally honest. I've probably listened to most, if not all, of the music that you've put out. I've never
wow,
played any of the games at all.
that's
So
cool.
there's also that side of it, right? Where you have people who like your music, and if you're creating something for a game,
Mm,
like you're like Hans Zimmer creating a soundtrack for a movie, it's the same thing. You're also creating something that's going to be now part of your legacy, and
Mm.
maybe even go exclusively to people who are just listening to your music and not actually playing the game, right? I'm
He's like,
wondering
I
how
didn't
much
think
that
about that
factors
before.
in. Yeah, I think about it. Yeah, I think about that a lot. I wonder if Rich is thinking about his legacy.
So wait, so what's the question and all that?
Sorry. The question is, how much do you factor in that whatever you choose to work on and the process itself, the music, how much are you factoring in that this will then become part of your discography, part of your the music that's out there that people listen to, if that makes sense?
I don't really think about it too much, honestly. Like if I really feel like some there really hasn't been anything that's so atrocious that I would like try to bury it. Um, because I put a lot of effort into everything I do. So even if, and I take a lot of time to think about what I work on, and that doesn't mean that I can predict whether it's going to be a success or not, and that things could, you know, it could ultimately be less than great. But I'll still try to do the best I can, and I think for the most part, that means that I make stuff that I think is generally good enough to put out there. Um, it's very rare that there's anything that I would like is so atrocious that I would but like the person I did it for is like, this is great, good job.
Right.
Right.
Like, so it's out there, but I hate it. Like, there's a little bit of that every once in a while, but for the most part, it's not a huge issue. But I will say that like I early on in my career, I decided very intentionally to because I was doing original music just under like Disasterpeace, like as an artist kind of thing, and then I was also doing soundtracks work under my real name. But early on, I decided to
Wait.
combine
Disaster Piece
this.
is not your real name.
No, it's not my given name of birth. I'm sorry to say.
I thought okay. I thought it was the other way around. Okay, my
I
bad.
don't even think of Disasterpeace as a person, but
Wow.
but at a very early stage of my career, I was like, I'm just gonna like do everything under the umbrella of Disasterpeace, and in a way that like it's part of became part of like my whole approach to work, where I brought an agenda to every project. Like I want this to be artistically successful. Um, so it helped feed into my sort of outlook on the kind of projects to take and the kind of projects to not take. Um, and It made me not think of it just as a job, I guess. Like it made me think of it as like, I'm trying to make something artistic within the confines of like, a commercial project. So it's challenging to do that.
It's an interesting scaffolding. You've kind of built this sort of psychological scaffolding for yourself
Yeah.
to
It's the
frame
delusion.
it.
It's what
Yeah,
it is.
yeah. That's what I was gonna say, and then I chose a different word. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
But it ties into the business model. Is your business model, do you think, unique or fairly unique? Where you're based, I mean, most of it is, I assume, the project, and then after it, Bandcamp or whatever. I don't know. Maybe live performances. I'm not sure. But
Hmm.
is that a unique business model? How did you find that?
I don't think it's unique now
Yeah.
per se, but in the age of YouTubers and everything, I don't think it's that unique. But maybe back when I started, it was a more unique thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a lot of peers who were going into looking for like traditional jobs. I was a remote worker in 2004, so I'm used to it. I mean, I was a remote worker when I was like 14 years old, like in to the year 2000 or whatever. So I'm an internet baby. Like I've been living on the internet in some capacity for a long time, and I don't really use the internet that much anymore for social reasons, which is I think a good thing for me personally. But it definitely helped me get to where I am, and helped me develop a career. Um, I think developing a brand, like having a quote unquote brand, which has become a very controversial thing the last couple of years, like associating yourself with a brand, is
Yeah.
something that I figured out how to do for myself a long time ago. So I don't know if that means I'm ahead of the curve or whatnot, but
I would say so, especially if you started remote working in the year 2000.
Well,
yeah,
yeah, I think so. I think you're right, Sandy. Also, I mean, a lot of musicians are just going to try to grind and grind until they become famous musicians, but you're getting paid up front. And then there's a model for being a legitimate musician too. So
yeah,
you're getting the best of both worlds. Like you don't have to work at Staples and also be a musician. You're bringing them together, right? So that's cool.
yeah. Basically, it was a way to like consolidate everything and make it a little easier for myself. I think it's worked out well for me. I haven't really had to chase fame or anything like that. Um, but I'm able to make a living, which is great, and I don't feel like, yeah, I just feel really blessed and fortunate. Um, yeah, and I've been kind of pushing the same boulder up the hill for a long time, and I think that makes a difference too. I was fortunate enough to choose like a name and then stick with it too for like eight. I don't even know how many years it's been now. 20 years. Um, I mean, I could have been an 18-year-old and chosen a really dumb name and then had to like start over. Yeah. But I think Disasterpeace is like it's cool. So
It is
A
cool.
it's cool
It's
true
now.
still cool.
inspirational story of someone following their passion. So I think
Shucks.
this question that I'm about to ask you is really interesting. We always ask our guests, it's like the last question. Um, so I'm going to leave you with this. If you could give yourself a cheat code and like go back into the past with a time machine to basically further your career along, to not do something, to do something more, what would that cheat code be?
I think it would have been better for me to have figured out like my personal life sooner. It took me a long time to figure it out, and I made a lot of like poor life choices. Um, so I would say like I grew up in the church, and then I kind of moved away from that, and I had a lot of like I don't know. I spent a long time wandering around, and if I could do things differently, I think I would have not done that. But at the same time, that I wouldn't be where I am, and I have a beautiful family, and I wouldn't want to like give any of that up either. So it's one of those things. It's one of those paradoxical things, right? So um, I guess that's what I would say.
I always get surprised. I keep thinking somebody's
Yeah.
going to say some sort of really, technical, snazzy tip or something, and everyone says, family, spend more time, you figure yourself out. Everyone says something really personal, it seems like,
Yeah.
and
It's usually
that's a
like
really
trust
interesting.
yourself, like believe in
Yes, yeah,
yourself,
Yeah,
make mistakes, that kind of thing.
God, I really wish I had
absolutely.
started using Unity a couple years earlier. That would have been great.
Yeah,
There we go.
wish
Yeah.
I'd bought Bitcoin in
Yeah.
2011. Man.
Oh, well
Yeah.
that I totally someone tried to they were like, "You should sell your albums for Bitcoin. I'll give you like Bitcoin." And this was like in 2008, and I was like, "I don't know anything about this. This seems dumb." And I probably could have,
You're like, I should have
You
done
want to
that.
change your
probably
And
could have
answer?
that's
had my
my
own
cheat
island
code.
by now, and I blew it.
You can
So
Yeah.
change your answer, Rich. It's okay.
all that sappy stuff, and I just give me some
You're like, sell all
2008
my
era
music for
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. Yep.
Right.
Again, it was a pleasure. I know Luke is actually a big fan. Sorry, Luke, to put you under the spotlight, but yeah.
Keeping
You
a
already
straight
said you
face
listen to all
here.
my music, so it's kind of
Yeah.
it's too
No,
late.
I did, didn't I? Damn it. Trying to be cool.
Yeah. Well, it was a pleasure.
Have a great day.
You do.
All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. We really hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe, and check out all of our other episodes. We are available on Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube. We will see you guys next time. Bye.